And I think the story of Jericho teaches us about how a church body can work together in faith in God.
Jericho laga city matlab ta ekta church ke ekta church kan kana ek bishi bala se kini ka mohan ekta purna isora kam kurubo lage.
Because the Israelites were not successful by their own power or their own ideas.
Hey, Israel hambra tahan nijor laga takot pra tahan la nijor laga takot pra dimak pra paran hoide.
They were successful because of the power of God and their faith in Him.
Tahan parishe isor laga takot pra isor laga de biswas kurna isor laga takot pra para aside.
So Joshua chapter 6 starts with God saying two things to Joshua.
Yate Joshua chapter 6 de duita jinis isor ra kwa para start kura ase koesa.
God says to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands."
Sabi moi Jericho to apne laga hate dishe kuna Israel kan kwa dikhi pai ase.
But when God said this, Jericho was still standing. Its walls were up, its gates were very secure.
Ya kita itu kwa tamde holibi uttai itu kwa tamde Jericho la wall aru city to khara kuna thaka dikhi pai ase mohan.
So Joshua could think, God, what are you saying? How is Jericho delivered into my hands?
Hey, kini ka isor itu kini ka Jericho to apne pra mohan hate dishe kuna mohan buji pabo.
And then God told Joshua his plan.
Tate bra imtahan inga question kura bra isor bra Israel kan ke kui dia dikhai dia mohan pai ase.
And God's plan is very strange.
Isor la ka plan do na mohan ke ki gula ase itu peshe sita ase ko ase. God's peshe takot ase ko ase.
God's plan is march around the city for 7 days.
Isor ra kushi to Israel an ke eh sat par ghura de na kushi ko ase.
On the first 6 days, just march around it one time.
Hey, 6 days ini ekta gurai thaki na kwa dikhi pai ase mohan.
On the 7th day, march around it 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets.
7 time gurabi aru age de priest pra itu sulfur hala kuna to puribi na kushi.
Then everyone give a loud shout and the walls will collapse.
Itu tai isor la khuta mane bra sob ono hala kurishi hala kora tamde wall to girishi ko ase to.
So if you ask me, that doesn't sound like a very good plan for taking a walled city.
Hey, mutuan muke hutile hey to man idea to bhal nai na ke ekta city laga wall girai dibole karne to.
It required Joshua to completely rely on God.
Joshua ke isor lokote totally ki ase sob dibole karne noibu isor lokote rakhi dibole karne thaka ase.
It required complete faith in what God said.
Itu mohan sob mahalaga mondo isor lokote dibole laga kam ase.
And this shows us the kind of person Joshua was. He did not hesitate.
Joshua ka isor ra ki koshi itu sob mani shata laga mondo mani dikhi pai ase tade tai uku mun chutu korana aru uku mun back korana.
If I was Joshua, I would feel very silly going to the people and telling them this plan.
If moi ase gole to Joshua moi ase lu ki jane moi itu kubule karne ekdom ekta sorom lagibo na ge manu logode.
But Joshua knew he could trust in God.
Holibi Joshua to jane ase moi isor ke biswas koribo.
So he spoke to all the Israelites and told them this is God's plan.
So tai Joshua ro kose itu ase de isor laga plan to kuna Israel ka dikwa man dikhi pai ase.
And I wonder what all the Israelites thought of this plan.
Itu kwa tamde tai moi bhabna ko huna pare Israel sob ki bhabna kori thakibo na.
But the good thing is, no matter what they thought, they still obeyed God.
Ekta bhal do ki tahan bhabna korise holibi tahan isor la kota to bunishe ko ase.
It's not a problem to God when we have thoughts, doubts, things in our mind.
Itu mahal lokote bhabna holibi mahal lokote kiba bhabna biya no bhabna ekdom kuru na para itu to inega thaka to isor ba do ku to mundu biya na pai ko ase.
What God cares about is what will we act on.
Holibi isor laga khushi to apni han kinika itu de isor laga kwa khuta de kinika to han cholai itu ase ko ase.
Will we listen to our doubts and fears, or will we listen to the Word of God?
Mohan isor laga duk sukte bhabna kore na isor laga khuta to khune.
And just as God said it would happen,
isor ro kwa nesna itu hobo.
Israelites on the 7th day of walking around the city, they shouted out their belief in God.
To itu kwa nesna tan isor ke biswas kuna 7 days kuraise aru to hoise.
They believed what God said at the beginning. Jericho has been given to you.
Tahan isor first thing the kwa nesna isor ba Jericho to itu apni halaga ase kwa nesna tahan kite isor la khuta manise itu tahan laga hoi jaise.
Now, did the loud shouting and trumpets cause the walls to fall down?
আপনি ভাবনা কৰি আছে কি একদম হাল্লা কৰা ট্ৰাম্পেট বা হাল্লা কৰা মূল্য মানুহ হাল্লা কৰাৰ পৰা ৱালটো গিৰিছে ভাবনা কৰি আছে নেকি
No. God caused the walls to fall down.
নো বলবি ঈশ্বৰৰ পৰা ৱালটো গিৰাইছে গৈ আছে
So, the point isn't what the Israelites did, it was the fact that they obeyed what God told them to do.
ইটো নহয় কি ঈশ্বৰ ইছৰাইলে কি কৰিছে বলবি ঈশ্বৰ লগা তাকো পৰা হৈ যা মন দেখি পাই আছে
God could have done it the first moment Joshua set his eyes on Jericho. God could have made the walls fall down.
সে কেতিয়া জেছুৱাৰ পৰা জেৰিকো ৱাল চাইছে ঈশ্বৰ একবাৰ কৰি দিব পাৰে বলবি ইটো কৰা নাই
But he wanted Joshua and the Israelites to learn to follow God's commands.
বলবি না ইয়াতে ঈশ্বৰ ৰানা কৰি দিব পাৰে বলবি না ঈশ্বৰ পৰা জেছুৱা আৰু ইজৰাইল হাংগে তালা পুতা মানাতে ৰাখিব মন যায়
So the point isn't logic, the point isn't good strategy, the point is following God.
ইটো ইমান আইডিয়াটো ইমানটো ভাল নহয় বলবি ইটো ওভাৰঅল পইণ্টটো কেনেকুৱা ঈশ্বৰকে ইজৰাইল খামৰা ঈশ্বৰ লগা পিঠিতে যাব আৰু ঈশ্বৰ কিনা বিশ্বাস কৰিব এইটো আছে
So the question always when we read Bible verses is, how do we apply this to our lives?
So Bible kita man puri ase mahanga question ekta thado hey itu Bible verse ka photo moi kinga itu chulawo na ini na bhabna puru lage koise
How should we as a church apply this to our church?
so church kamra kinga iniga Bible pura to moi libe dali ki koise itu mahan life de chulawo na itu bhali bhabna puru lage
And I think the lesson of this story of Jericho
mahan kitia Jericho la story to sabo
is to not be overwhelmed by the situations God puts us in and how impossible they look.
mahalaga situation ki jai ase ekdom kuma do mon to thakibo pare kuma do mon khushi thakibo pare itu bra mahan beshi overwhelmed beshi kiba nohobo lage bolibi kiniga isola khota manna bubu lage mon ki pai ase
God is not asking us to make the impossible happen.
isor rado mahange napara jinis hobo la khota pai ase
God is not asking us to win the victory.
isor mahange ei tu tu ki ase victory sob jitibi itu kon hoy
God is the one who has success and victory.
isore ase success aro mahan jitibole karone to isore ase pai ase
He wants us to learn to rely on Him.
tai mahange na isor mahange na tar logote rely koribole karone tai logote thakibole karone itu shikai ase pai ase
Relying on ourselves isn't going to make the walls of Jericho come down.
hey mohan nijor ki biswas korle na kuno hobo jericho wall bit kwa nisina tahan nijor ki biswas korle bi kibo thakne ko
So, in your own personal lives,
apni na nijor laga jiban de
but also in your lives as a church,
aro nulibe as a church laga life de
I'm sure we can feel like we're in difficult situations, in impossible situations.
moi jani pai ase mohan tu tibi thakibo aro ekdom jabo na para rasta nika tu tibi thakna dikhi thakibo jai thakibo
But the answer isn't to throw in more effort.
olibe answer ta ase ki man sob mano ekdom takot pra kosis koribo lage
The answer isn't to come up with smarter ideas.
itu mohan no itu ekdom idea bhal loina ahala kutan hoy
The answer is to spend time with God.
olibe anta laga answer do isor logote kinika kiman time dibo lage
Spend time in His Word
ta laga khota de time phelabole homoy de phelabo lage
and find out what is God asking you to do.
hey moi isor ba moi ki koro dibole mon jai ase itu bisaribo lage
Even if it doesn't seem like a very logical plan.
aro itu homoy de ekdom itu do thik nai na ki bi thaku tu apni bhabna bi koribo pare
So, when you leave here today, I would just like you to take that away with you and think about how does that apply for me and how does that apply for this church.
apni yatibar na ja age de apni logode itu kinika kona itu to moi logode itu khuta ko hamni kinika kona moi logola jiban de thakibo aro moi laga jiban de kinika chulabo itu bhabna korna cha thakibo lagi jabo lagi
And before I finish, I'd just like to make one other point.
moi khotom ho age de moi khuta khotom ho age aru moi ekta point lagai dibo mon jai ko bole mon jai
I was reading Joshua chapter 6 and I realized the story of Jericho actually starts in chapter 5.
moi kitia jericho laga porishi chapter 6 de bolibi asondo chapter 5 pra start kora ase
The end of chapter 5, verses 13 to 15. And
Mohan,
again, you can read this at home.
ya mohan kitia joshua chapter 5 last part to sabo tati rahi start kore du laga kiba kam do tohan kori dena kuru pare
So Joshua meets the commander of God's army.
Hey, याते जशुवा दुना फर्स्ट तो कमांडर इन आर्मी के लोग पूरे को ऐसे सबसे डामर लागे लोग पूरे को ऐसे
So an angel, and this angel is carrying a sword.
एंजल एकदम चाकू तो निलबी स्वॉर्ड तो भी ना थाका
And Joshua is focused on what's ahead of him, which is taking the promised land, taking Jericho.
होलिबी जशुवा तो किनेगा मोय इदु इस्राएल खानगे ईश्वर बापुआ जकादे मोय लुई जाबो इदुते दाय भावना को राखिसे को ऐसे
And Joshua asks the commander of the Lord's army, a question we would all ask.
So जशुवा ब्रा कमांडर इन आर्मी के खुतिसी बुझे किमान दिने लोबो
Are you with me, or are you for my enemies?
अपने तो मोय लोगोते आसे ना मोय लगा एनिमी लोगोते आसे गुना कमांडर इन चीफ के जशुवा रो खुतिसी को ऐसे